A Hedgehog's Christmas. There was nothing in the whole wide wood that Hedgy wanted to do so much as decorate the great tree. It stood at the very center of the wood on a tall hill, which in the summer was covered with soft grass and the best bugs to eat. Hedgy's burrow was not far away, and he loved to come and rest in the shade of the great tree. Even in winter, some magic seemed to be on the tree, for it always stayed green, while the leaves of the other trees in the forest turned first orange, then red, then brown before finally falling to the ground. Hedgy had the idea every year to decorate the great tree, but every year he didn't. He always found himself getting very tired before Christmas ever arrived, what with the cold and the dark nights and the snow. Poor little Hedgy would look up at the great tree as the first flakes began to fall and say, "Tomorrow." Then he would curl up in his little nest, feeling very round with all the food he had been eating, and fall asleep. When he woke up, the snow would be gone, the first green leaves would soon be budding, and Hedgy would have missed Christmas once again. Hedgy could feel that winter was coming now, and with it, the call to hibernate. The warm breezes that he had enjoyed in the shade of the great tree were turning bitter, and they brought a cold scent. Hedgy gazed from his favorite spot among the great roots out across the wood. From here he could see the familiar places he had lived his whole life. He could even see into the woods beyond to the north, where he had never gone. They seemed strange and foreign, even though they were still under the protection of the woodland king. Most of the trees there had lost their leaves already, and the woods beyond looked very prickly. Not that there was anything wrong with looking prickly. Geese, flying overhead on their way to warmer airs, trumpeted their farewells. "Goodbye, Hedgy, we'll see you in the spring." Hedgy waved a tiny paw after them before trundling back to his burrow. The cold was making him very sleepy. If the great tree was going to get decorated, then it had to be today. Inside his warm little home, Hedgy noticed with some dismay that he had no decorations fit for the tree. Also, quite distressing to a hungry hedgehog at the start of winter, his larders were very low. A few dried oranges, some berries, and a couple pawfuls of nuts. "First, I must gather more food, and then I can make some decorations," he thought, with a longing glance at the great tree as he shuffled back out amongst the falling leaves. Squirrel was out, chattering in the trees. "Hello, Squirrel," Hedgy said. "I'm going to decorate the great tree today. Do you have any decorations you'd like to add?" "Nothing to give," Squirrel chided. "Winter's coming and I need everything I can get and more. Do you know that you have leaves stuck in your spikes?" Hedgy tried his best to remove the offending leaves, with little success, while also observing the contents of his basket. "I ought to have enough now," he thought. But Squirrel's chattering had made him nervous. "I really should gather for a little while longer. There's still plenty of time in the day." Deer was pawing at the frost-covered ground in search of tender grass. "Hello, Deer," Hedgy said. "I'm going to decorate the great tree today. Do you have any decorations you'd like to add?" "I have nothing to give," snorted Deer. "Winter will be here soon. I need everything I have and more, if I can get it. Shouldn't you be inside? You have frost on your whiskers." Once he had got far enough away, Hedgy brushed his whiskers clean and counted out his finds. There was enough now, he was sure. And yet, Deer's words made him uneasy. "Oh, I really should gather a little bit more. It won't take much longer," he said to the great tree as the first snow began to fall. Robin was flitting from one bush to another, pecking at frozen winter berries. "Hello, Robin," Hedgy said. "I'm going to decorate the great tree today. Do you have any decorations you'd like to add?" "I have nothing to add," Robin piped. "I hardly have enough as it is. Shouldn't you be in your burrow? It is time for you to sleep." Hedgy did feel tired, now that it was mentioned. His legs felt slow and stiff, and he noticed now that the sun had fallen quite low. He shuffled back home through the fading light, each step slower and smaller than the one before. With his eyes nearly closed, he put away the food he had gathered. There were still no decorations, but he was tired, so very tired. His eyelids felt heavy as he curled into his warm bed of leaves in a tight little ball. "Tomorrow," he said. "No," a small voice inside him whispered. "Today." The hedgehog opened sleep-dusted eyes and set to work. He had nothing grand or fitting to use for decorations, but he fashioned some ornaments with what he had. His tiny pink paws strung oranges, berries, and nuts on a line as colorful and sweet as a hedgehog could hope for. A star was soon made of sticks and pretty stones gathered from the river. Deep snow was beginning to settle as Hedgy left his warm burrow and braved the blustery cold. "Come, Squirrel, come, Deer, come, Robin," he called. "Everything's ready. Won't you come decorate the tree?" "Tomorrow," came from the bole of a tree. "Tomorrow," came from the meadow. "Tomorrow," came from the branches. Grimly, Hedgy set to his task, alone. The garland was wrapped and looped around the great tree. Somehow, with skill and more than a little luck, the star was placed on the very highest branch. The sun was setting below the horizon when, with cold little paws and a frozen little nose, Hedgy gazed upon the results of his handiwork. It was nearly perfect, he thought, though it was still missing something. He scurried back down the hill to his burrow, where he had some dried flowers that he had kept from summer. A great snorting, chirping, chattering sound greeted Hedgy as he returned with his paws full of colorful petals. A wild congregation had formed around the great tree. Squirrel was there, and Robin, and Deer, but also a great many others. Squirrel was arguing with Chipmunk over the last of the nuts, Robin was greedily gulping down berries one by one, and Deer was straining her neck to reach any oranges that she could. "Stop it!" Hedgy squeaked. "Those are my decorations!" The crowd scattered into the wood at his cries, once they noticed them. By the time Hedgy reached the great tree, there was nothing left but a tangled bit of string and a few half-eaten ornaments. He sniffled against the tears that froze on his furry cheeks and gently picked up his star, which had been knocked from its high perch and now lay in a crumpled heap. It was a sad little decoration anyways, he thought after some time. Nothing like a real star. The sun finished setting and faint stars began to appear in the sky, one by one above the sad little hedgehog. He remained on the hill for some time, almost glad of the bitter cold that partially distracted him from his sorrow. In a brilliant flash, a real star, falling from the heavens, covered Hedgy with silver light. He peered up at it from the snow with blinking black eyes. For one shining moment, the great tree seemed rimmed with unearthly fire before the star fell into the woods beyond, and darkness returned. Hedgy gazed past the great tree, past the hill, and into the wide lands of the woods beyond. Somewhere, out there, the star had fallen, an ornament worthy of the great tree. Hedgy looked back down the hill. His warm burrow was so near. He could forget all about this and be curled up inside and enjoy a cozy sleep until spring. Not yet, the tiny voice inside him said. And so the little hedgehog hunched himself up against the cold and scampered down the far slope of the hill into the woods beyond. The snow was deeper there, and poor little Hedgy was more than once forced to tunnel through the thickest patches. The long winter night wore on, and still he could find no trace of the star. His tiny nose was stuck high into the air to catch some strange scent, if it could. There was nothing, just the cold air telling him to go back home. It was dark, and so very cold. At last, Hedgy felt that he could go no further. His paws were frozen, and his legs stiff. He made a shallow nest of leaves, a pitiful thing compared to his own bed at home, and prepared to wait until morning. But there was a light. Not the sun, certainly, but neither was it the moon. Trees were thrown into sharp relief by the growing light. And there was music. A tinkling chime like icicles laughing in the first dawn of spring. Hedgy could not resist the call to leave his meager shelter and pursue the source of the light and the music. He was dimly aware of other animals as well as he shoveled through the glittering snow. They all moved, trance-like, towards the light, hardly noticing one another. Hedgy came, blinking into a clearing full of all the creatures of the woods, it seemed. Some he could only see as silhouettes, while others were bathed to the point of glowing in the bright light of the star, for that is what it was. It was resting in the middle of the glade. Flowers spreaded around it where the snow had been melted away. Berries on nearby bushes shone like small points of flame. It was beautiful, if a little frightening. Occasionally a creature would gingerly approach the star, only to leap away quite suddenly. Hedgy saw a squirrel creep cautiously forward to take one timid sniff before scampering up the nearest tree. Hedgy kept to the outside. Now that he had found the star, he dared not go any closer. And besides, the ring of animals made it nearly impossible to do so. The little hedgehog could not look away from the beautiful star, so it was quite a surprise to him when he realized that a path had opened up before him, and all the eyes of those gathered were turned, reverently, in his direction. Hedgy turned also and found that the path had not been made for him, but for the woodland king who was standing behind him. His antlers, glowing silver in the light, were entwined with a crown of holly. The poor hedgehog could not decide what to do, and so he curled into a tight ball and stared out from behind his quills. "Dear little hedgehog," the king said, "you are the one, most humble of beasts, to carry this star. It shall be you that places it atop the great tree, that its light may shine for all the woods to see, a beacon through the long dark of winter." It took some encouragement and a reassuring smile from the king for Hedgy to work up the courage to approach the bright star. He picked it up in frozen paws that were quickly warmed by that celestial traveler. He could feel the music in him now, vibrating through every quill. The animals followed Hedgy in a slow procession through the woods beyond, back to the great tree. Berries and flowers were brought from the glade, and animals hurried back to their homes and returned with more. Soon the great tree was decorated beyond Hedgy's wildest hopes. The hedgehog was helped to the highest branches, and there he placed the star, where it blazed forth even brighter than before. The music rose louder, and one by one the animals took up the song. Hedgy shyly joined in, but only briefly. The moment was too perfect, even for song. He sat, bathed in the light and sound. Very slowly he curled into a ball as his sleepy eyelids closed. The animals gradually dispersed back to their various dens, nests, hollows, and burrows, and silence returned to the hill. The music of the star was only a faint sound on the edge of hearing now. The woodland king stayed until all the others were gone. He stayed, standing over the tiny snowy form of the sleeping hedgehog. Carefully, very carefully, he brought the sleeper back to his burrow where Hedgy woke enough to tuck himself into his bed of leaves. Happy Christmas, he yawned. Sleep well, little one, the king said, and happy Christmas.